Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Atheist Experience. We are live. Today is November 22nd, 2020, unless you're watching this after today, in which case it's not, and it's whatever the current date is wherever you are, but I don't know where you are or when you're watching this. So all I can do is give you the date and time of when we're recording it, which is the best I can do. How are you, people? Thanks for everybody for tuning in. We have a special guest with us this week. Welcome, Dave Ramsey. How are you, Dave?
Hey, good, Matt. Thanks for having me.
I'm gonna muddle through some of these announcements, and then we'll introduce Dave a bit better. We'll talk a little bit, and then we will get on to what most of you are tuning in for, which is us taking calls from people. This is a weekly call-in program sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization supporting positive atheism and separation of religion and government. You can find out more about the ACA at atheist-community.org. For now, though, if you are watching us live on YouTube right now, if you look up above the chat, there's a donate link. 100% of your donations go directly to the ACA. Do not pass go. Do not pass Google. They don't take a cut, nothing. And that's one of the many ways that you can help support this organization. In addition to that, you can also become a member of this channel. And actually, I just saw somebody upgrade their membership to the director level while I was prepping to talk about this. You can also get merchandise at a bit.ly/AEN merch. And you can support us at patreon.com/The Atheist Experience. We have 2 new Facebook groups that we are promoting that are the unofficial official groups, or whatever. Whatever we're going to call them, that's what we're going to call them. But it's AXP. There we go. Facebook.com/groups AXPFG for the fan group, and then Facebook.com/groups/AXPPFG, which is for the private fan group. You can go and apply there for membership of both of those. In addition to this program, there's a lot of other stuff that we do, and I love to mention all of it. And we're shuffling some stuff around just to see where things fit a little better. Talk Heathen is still in its regular 1 o'clock slot. V was on there earlier with a guest today. The Nonprofits is new and airing at 3 o'clock on Sundays, so it's in between Talk Heathen and Atheist Experience. There are new hosts, new segments, and there was an episode that went out at 3 o'clock today. You can find out more about that by going to youtube.com/thenonprofitsaca. In the upcoming week, this coming Thursday is going to be Thanksgiving here in the United States, where we don't thank any deity necessarily, but we express our thanks for surviving, I don't know, the summer, the harvest, whatever. We're preparing for winter. It's all awful. Maybe we're celebrating the fact that we did terrible things to indigenous people and stole their land. I'm not completely sure what we're celebrating, but it's fun and it's food. The thing is, I'd like to point out that it's not essential that people gather together in large groups, and that it is in fact discouraged. Mask wearing is generally being pushed in many places, as is social distancing. And if you care about your loved ones, maybe you wait till next year to have Thanksgiving. I'm just making suggestions. I'm not giving you health advice for that. You should trust the experts that are putting out the information that tells you to wear a mask. But because of that, we're going to be kind of paring down a little bit this week. So Secular Sexuality, which would normally be on Thursday, is going to be on Thursday. It will not be live, though, but it will be new content. Same is true for Truth Wanted on Friday after Thanksgiving. That will not be live. Well, it will be a live broadcast of pre-recorded information, but you can still watch a new episode of Secular Sexuality and Truth Wanted. Next Sunday's Atheist Experience, I will not be here. Wait, I wanted like a choir, doing the so there's a week without Matt. But I'm happy to point out that Jenna is going to be hosting along with our good friend Anthony Magnabosco, and so next week's show should be just hot buttered awesome. I'm here today in part because of the wonderful crew that are behind the scenes, taking calls, screening things, making sure video works right, making sure audio works right. There's not a better crew anywhere in any show. Look at them. They're holding up that, by the way, it says puck, not fuck. But if it said fuck, it would be okay. I'd be okay with that. But people have got their coasters and they're out there working. Look, Katie is so busy screening a call right now that she just didn't even, look, she's waving. Anyway, we are really happy and proud of our team. And that reminds me, don't mess with mods in chat. Don't mess with me in chat either. If you're worried about, no, somebody timed me out. Yeah, that's probably going to happen. But apart from those announcements of what's slightly changing with the shows, there's not a lot of super specialness going on, except for this. I'm here to welcome Dave Ramsey, and you can go to dbramsey.com to find information on his book. We're going to talk a little bit about your past, how you got from there to here, what your thoughts are, what your book's about, and then we're going to go on and take callers. So, Dave, you're like you were a preacher for 10 years and, studied and got degrees and all this, and I'm just a duffer. So how'd you get from there to here?
Well, Matt, you're probably smarter than I am. It took me, almost 11 years of formal academic study of religion to arrive at my agnosticism. But essentially, that's how I got here. I was both the study of religion in an academic setting. Some of it was life experience, losing a dad at 12, and the well-intentioned but terribly misguided chants of a church that went from saying your dad has been healed to everything happens for a reason, God must have needed your dad. I was a senior minister of two Baptist congregations in Virginia. And at the age of 35, I walked away and started my life over again. And I've never looked back, no regrets. And my book is about my journey. I also take on some very popular, but I think horrible theological sayings like everything happens for a reason, it was his time to go, God has a plan for your life, are just a few of the topics that I take on in the book.
Did you get, now you and I both come from a primarily Baptist background. I was primarily Southern Baptist, occasionally attended like Pentecostal churches, but we're talking a little bit about the sayings that you mentioned that you have some objection to. I just did a couple of videos about common sayings that actually aren't in the Bible, like love the sinner, hate the sin. That's not in the Bible. Yeah. Somebody else, I think it was the Transformed Wife the other day, posted that the Bible says abortion is murder. The Bible doesn't mention abortion at all. It's silent on the issue, even provides essentially a recipe for an abortifacient. If you suspect that your woman has been cheating on you, you pour this concoction down their throat, and whether or not it causes a miscarriage or abortion or just results in sterility, it's still this barbaric notion that women are second tier, that they're property, that somehow they could have been defiled, but you can have as many wives and a harem of concubines as you want. And so going through these statements that aren't really part of religion, one of them, I'm leading up to this. Did you hear after the loss of your father that God needed a new angel in heaven? Because I keep hearing that, but it seems to be more of a Catholic thing. And so I only ever hear it from Catholic relatives.
Oh, Matt, no, I heard it more than once. And, at the time, you're 12 years old. You haven't developed critical thinking yet. You believe what people tell you, particularly people in a church. But, looking back, what God needs a 46-year-old man more than a 12-year-old son? It just doesn't pass the sniff test. It was not offered in a cruel way, but it's experienced in a cruel way. And it's a side of God that eventually rejected. If there is a God, and that's the way that God works, that's a God that I want nothing to do with.
And the other thing is, there's nothing biblical about people being turned into angels. Angels are, from the standpoint of the Bible, they're not humans, and they're not something that was derived from human. They existed before humans. They're basically God's little servants.
Well, they're part of the mythology of the Bible. Let's face it. Yeah. I think the Bible is largely myth, as is Christianity. But people find meaning in myth, and people sometimes literalize myth. But didn't work for me.
Now, at some point, how long did you write your book? Speaking of God, we don't know shit.
I probably wrote it. I started writing it about a year and a half ago, and it went on sale October the 6th. It's been in my head for years, though, Matt. The premise has been in my head, and some of the other chapters. And I finally started writing about a year and a half ago, and then finally it launched in October.
Yeah, I have multiple books in my head. If I ever get any of them down on paper, I'll be impressed. But I'm continuing to work on it. So. What has been, obviously we managed to get you here on Atheist Experience to take calls and talk a little bit about the book. But since the book's been out such a short time, what's the reception been like? And, are you hitting up a bunch of other podcasts? Am I going to hear you, on the Thinking Atheist and all this in the near future as well?
Yeah, so I've been pleasantly surprised. I'm a nobody. No one knew me. I had no media presence. I worked with a publicist to build one. But the book's only been on sale for less than 2 months, and it got as high as number 12
Huh?
in the agnostic category on Amazon, right beside Sam Harris, who is a towering figure in this genre. I think it was his End of Faith was just to the left of mine at 11. And I think I'm up to 14 5-star reviews on Amazon. No one has panned it yet.
That'll
And the
change.
reviews are, oh, I know.
It'll
I
change
fully
today.
expect it. I fully expect it to be panned, but I'm pleased. My publicist is very pleased and said they are really surprised at how well the book's taken off.
Well, as a reminder to the people in chat, we've provided information. We can go find more. By the way, there's some people in chat commenting that they think you're possessed. So we want to let people know. Dave's coming to us live from a hotel with occasionally sketchy Wi-Fi, and so does this really awesome looking ghosty pixelating thing. I'm going to let him fix that really quick as we move on and start to take callers, and we'll come back. I want to make sure we get to callers that might have specific questions for Dave, both from his history and after finishing the book, etc. But we've got Michael in Colorado. How are you? You're on with Matt and Dave.
Yeah, hi. Nice to finally talk to you guys. Hi, Dave.
Hi.
Can you guys hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes. Welcome. What's the question? How can we help?
Oh, yeah. Hi. So first off, I just want to say thank you, Matt. I've been listening to you for quite some time, and you're definitely an inspiration to me, and as you've definitely helped me out in quite some ways that you were never even aware of.
Thank you. I
so
appreciate
that. But yeah, so I'm actually engaged to a Christian, and we have a 7-month-old daughter, and she wants to get her baptized. And at first I was hesitant with it, and now it's just I said go ahead if you really want to. I'm not going to fight you on that. But now she wants me to be going through these classes that I need to take in order to do the whole thing, and I'm just not comfortable with it. And when it got to me having to put my hand in it like that, I kind of put my foot down with it, and I told her I didn't want to do it anymore. Now it's just a big mess. So whenever I bring it up, it turns into a heated argument, and I just don't know how to explain to her, my side of it and how it's not going to make any sense if I go through those classes. I don't even know how that would even work. There's a lot of religious stuff that I need to go through, and I'm just not comfortable with it.
I'm guessing she's Catholic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what do you think, Dave? What would you do? You're married. You're married to a Catholic who wants to baptize your kid and make you go to classes about it.
That's a tough one. I experienced not something similar, but when I left the faith and just stopped going to church, it obviously created tension, in my marriage. It depends upon how important this is to your wife. Part of me would say go along, but when you go to the classes, ask the questions. When they start talking, say, how do you know that? Who taught you that? I mean, you could have fun with it. Don't tell your wife you're going to do it. But I mean, if I got pulled into one of those, I would be the guy with a hand up saying, how do you know that? Who taught you that? And oh, by the way, what's happening here? Is this like a life insurance policy? What's behind it? Because those are the larger questions, is what does your wife want to accomplish by doing this? Does she think that this is somehow going to put this child in God's protection plan, whether it be gold, silver, or bronze? Is it pure ritual? Is it a little of both? I would probably try to understand her motivations, but it's a difficult dilemma that you've described, and I don't envy you that. It's a tough one. I didn't have to deal with faith and marriage until much later in my life and marriage, but you're right out of the gate having to deal with it, and I don't think there are any easy answers.
I have some questions, Michael. So would she ask you to do this if you were Jewish or Baptist?
Yeah, see, that's the thing is I do believe she would. Because here's the thing, when I was a kid, I mean, I went through Catholic school. I went through, I mean, you name it, every camp. I did the whole communion thing. I mean, I did it all. And that was another reason why I started thinking about my religion and if it was even, legitimate, if it was something I should be even considering. And so growing up, I just don't want to see my daughter go through any of that. And
I'm not worried about the effects on your daughter.
It was miserable.
So one of the things about infant baptism is that the infants tend to not to remember it. It doesn't tend to impact their life at all. The real issue is that she's asking you to go take classes so that you can participate in your daughter's, routine. I'm assuming we're talking about an infant routine baptism. Like
right.
You're out.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. So what you know and what you are trained on is irrelevant to your daughter's baptism. So, for example, if I was married to your wife, my answer at the time, let's say I was still a Southern Baptist, would be, I don't share your beliefs about routine infant baptism. To me, baptism means something entirely different and something that an individual enters into voluntarily. It's not a part of salvation. It's about a commitment. And I would go on and describe what, as a Baptist, I believed. And if I were to, I'd be willing to let you, yes, you can sprinkle water on my daughter's forehead and take a picture. But that doesn't mean you get to force me to go to school. I'm not the one being baptized. Right. Meanwhile, how would your wife feel if you took your daughter to a debaptism? Because I've hung out with a bunch of atheists who have debaptisms. I've done them. Greta Christina and I did some around the rapture ram, where, we put on our robes and we grabbed our hairdryer and dried everybody off. And now you've been debaptized. While it's a bit of fun and a bit of mockery, I think that the very notion that you could maybe do something like that, I think that would offend and outrage and probably really piss off your wife. And so she needs to think about what impact these decisions are going to have on you. It's one thing to compromise about your daughter and say, you know what, I'll let you sprinkle some water in her head. But getting you to go to classes seems more about trying to change you. And that means that you guys need to have a very serious conversation.
Right. And that's kind of what I was thinking too. I was just trying to get another opinion about it. Because that was the road that I was planning on going down, was having a serious conversation with her about the whole situation. And yeah, I mean, to me, if I told her, I agreed with going ahead and doing it, go ahead and do it. But when me starting having to go to school was the problem. I was like, well, now we're just getting ridiculous here.
Yep.
So,
well, this feels like.
Need to know.
So did your wife know you were an atheist when you guys met and got married?
Yeah.
So what this feels like, and I'm not pretending, I don't want to claim that I'm reading her mind, but based on your description, this feels like she's uncomfortable with your atheism and is trying to find a way to nudge you towards accepting what she accepts. And if she wants to do that, she can be grown up about it and actually have the conversations, and not the, oh, come on, it's your daughter, you need to go to these courses just so that you can be there and get the picture, and then you don't have to believe anymore. That's manipulative.
Right. Yeah, because I told her I would go through with the whole ceremony, but when it got into classes, I told her I wasn't comfortable with that, and her reaction, her answer to that was, well, I don't know what the difference is. You go to church with your grandmother. I'm like, well, she's 95 years old, and I do that out of the sureness of my heart to take her there. It doesn't mean, a building's a building to me. That's all it is, and I'm doing it for, her. There's nothing to do with the religion at all at that point. And, in her eyes, she sees it as, why wouldn't you do, you go there with her. Why don't you do that with your own kid? Like I said, I would go through with it. I just don't expect me to, go through classes and all that.
Yeah. I don't know what else to say. I mean, this is something you've got to decide what you're comfortable with, and you're going to have the conversations with your wife. Hopefully Dave and I have been helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it pretty much what I was thinking. I just it's always good to get a second opinion, and I always wanted to call in, and I've been listening for like the past 10 years, if not more, and yeah, it's just very good information and always helps me out. So I really appreciate what you guys are doing.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate the call.
All right.
Stay safe.
Yeah, man. Yep, you too. Thank you.
All right. So we have more callers, including Paul in England, who says that prayer is being strawmanned by atheists. How you doing, Paul? You're on with Dave and Matt.
Oh, hello, Dave and Matt. I'm doing very well. How about yourselves?
Doing well,
Great.
too. So which atheists are strawmanning prayer, and why? And what do we need to say about it?
Sure. Okay, so I've heard prayer being spoken of on the show several times, and it seems to be kind of represented as like wish granting from a sky genie.
No, I've never, ever in my fucking life seriously presented prayer as if it's wish granting from a genie. In fact, I've corrected countless atheists about that. So you haven't heard that on the show from me.
Okay.
Or if you have,
fair enough.
Correct.
And
however, I find it curious because of the things that are potentially prayer granting. What's the phrase? Wish granting. The Bible does say that whatever two or more of you are gathered together in my name, whatever you ask for, I will grant. That's in the Bible, correct?
I've heard this. Yes.
Yeah, but have you read it? Have you bothered to? You've heard this. So you've read it?
Uh-huh.
So you know that the Bible says that whenever two or more of you are gathered together in my name, whatever you ask, I shall do, right?
Unlike yourself, I've yet to actually read the Bible cover to cover. I've done so with the God Delusion at least twice, but not with the Bible. I've read several passages and obviously had things, taught to me from it, etc., as well. But yeah, I've heard this thing. I couldn't tell you exactly where it is.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm aware that it's in the Bible, but it says that.
So it's in the Bible a couple different times, but Mark 11 is probably the easiest one. Therefore, I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you've received it and it will be yours, which isn't quite the same as I'm actually going to grant it. But while I agree with you, and I don't present prayer as if it's a wish granting service, the Bible actually advocates for the notion that it could be viewed fairly as something like that. So if you're going to call in and suggest that atheists are strawmanning prayer, it would be useful if you didn't start by something that I'm not supporting of and something that isn't, that isn't consistent with the Bible. Because if the Bible says, hey, whatever you guys ask for, I'll grant, that's pretty much wish fulfillment.
Yeah, can I chime in here, Matt? So in my experience as a minister, and I was a minister for 10 years, I would say a good majority of prayers that I would often hear, particularly the casual ones, had something to do with God's protection. So maybe not wish granting, but keep us safe, keep us from harm, protect us. And I think some of that goes to the previous caller's story about baptism. I think there's some magical thinking tied into baptism along with other religious rites. But I would say that I found, and I write about this in my book, that for some, not necessarily majority, but for some people, religion is a life insurance policy, a protection against what happens after we die, and for some, protection for what happens in this life. So that was, my experience as minister for 8 years.
Hello?
Do we lose the call?
Oh, we're waiting on Paul.
Sorry, I didn't realize.
So what are we going to correct, Paul?
I'm still here. I hope you can still hear me. No, I do totally agree with you that wish granting is Bible verses that you mentioned, that it does say, what you ask for, you will receive.
So then how can you possibly fault atheists for representing it that way?
The gratitude I feel that the gratitude area is being overlooked. For example, prayers of thanks.
Paul?
It's important, I believe,
Paul?
to cultivate. Hello?
Paul.
Yes, ma'am.
So if we're in agreement
Yes.
that the Bible supports that notion, how can you possibly criticize atheists? How can you possibly say that atheists are straw manning prayer as one? Hang on, let me finish the question. How can you say that atheists are straw manning prayer while acknowledging that the very thing you were objecting to is in the Bible? So clearly atheists aren't straw manning. And now your objection is that, well, they're just not talking as much about the thanks part of it. And the reason for that is atheists don't think there's a God. I don't think there's any one to give thanks to. I don't think a God's done anything for me to be thankful for. And so while I appreciate the fact that when I was a Christian and I prayed to give thanks, and plenty of other Christians pray to give thanks, simply pointing out that there's one version of prayer that you don't object to is in no way suggests that atheists were wrong or that people were straw manning or that the other views of prayer aren't true. So what's your point?
Well, when you put it that way, it makes me seem like I don't have one.
Okay.
Matt, let me respond to the prayers of thanksgiving. So I actually address this in my book. Okay, so let's assume there is some God responsible for the good, and you want to give that God thanks. When are you going to have a WTF prayer and say, "Hey God, how about the shit that is happening?" You kind of let God off the hook. It's like a game of heads I win, tails you lose. When all you do is thank God, and assuming you believe in a God, where are your prayers that hold God accountable? This same God accountable for the bad stuff. Seems like God kind of gets off pretty easy there. And there's a wonderful scene in the Book of Mormon, a wonderful musical song, Hasadiga Ibawai. And I won't give the play away, but it's where the Ugandans utter a WTF prayer. It's very crude, but it's to my point about, okay, if you're gonna ascribe good, or give thanks to this God for good things, what are you going to do with the bad things? Because you can't just let them off the hook if that's your view of God.
I think my belief is that prayer can be effective with or without a divine presence to hear it, in that there is power in positive thinking and in programming the subconscious. So when you focus on things like gratitude and things like putting your priorities in sense of order of the things that you want, and you're asking for certain strengths and positive inner qualities rather than some kind of wish that you want to be fulfilled, I think that there's a power in that's perhaps psychological rather than theological, if that makes any sense. Hello?
So one of the things is I find that one of the most disgusting things ever, because essentially what you're suggesting is that the people who are impoverished and starving and dying, who've been begging a God to intervene for ages, just aren't grateful enough.
Oh, no. I don't believe I'm suggesting that at all.
Yes, you are, because this whole power of positive thinking, hang on, Paul. The power of positive thinking is bullshit. It does not work. You can think positively all you like and still have an absolutely miserable life, and it doesn't make it your fault. The power of positive thinking is a myth. It is a deepity. To the extent that it's true, it's trivial in the sense of, oh, I'm going to be nice to people and they're probably going to be nice to me back. But to the extent that it's significant, it is in fact false. You can think positively all you like, and you're not going to get any result from positive thinking alone.
Agreed.
Okay, so
is also required, and perhaps a bit of luck, perhaps a bit of cooperation from others, and
perhaps even after thinking positively, one still has all the work left to do towards that goal.
I wouldn't say all the work. I think that's a little hyperbolic, but I see where you're going.
I don't see how it's hyperbolic at all, because thinking positively is just me saying, oh, I can do this. I still have to do all the work.
Creating a good mindset.
No, but a good mindset, you've already acknowledged, is no guarantee of success or change.
I didn't say it was a guarantee. I just said it was part of the journey. You know,
But it may not be. I can sit here and be negative Nancy, and if I still take the steps towards a goal, I'm gonna achieve that goal. It's the steps toward the goal that matter, not my attitude. I could sit here all day long and say, there's no way this is going to work. There's no way this is going to work. I'm going to keep doing it. I've been doing it for 15 years. I've been talking till I'm blue in the face. There's no way it's going to work. I'm definitely not going to change Paul's mind. There's no way I'm going to change Paul's mind. But if I keep having the conversation, I may in fact still change Paul's mind, correct? Correct?
Paul? Bueller?
Evidently, I'm not going to change Paul's mind. So we'll move on to somebody else. That's kind of disappointing because the truth is, if I take all the steps of arguing honestly, I may well change Paul's mind. I may not. But it's not necessarily contingent on whether or not I have a positive thought about this. That takes place at a meta level. It's like, hey, I'm going to sit down and I love to play chess. I'm not great, but I love to play, and I love to play bullet and blitz. And so I could sit down at a chessboard with somebody, and I know what their rating is. Like for the other night, I played somebody who was like 2,300, and the game automatically spotted me an entire queen. And yet still, I looked at it and said, this is probably going to be a loss. I went into it thinking it was going to be a loss. And you know what? It was. Now, was it my negative thinking that made me lose, or was it the fact that I blundered a piece because I am not as good as the person I'm opposed to? I could have also gone into it thinking, I'll win. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it gave me a queen. That's way too much. I'll win, and still have lost. While I appreciate the fact that positive thoughts can change your outlook and maybe encourage you to take the steps towards a goal more, it's the steps towards the goal that matter.
Yeah, and Matt, to that point, as you were saying earlier, first of all, the power of positive thinking is not in the Bible. It's not a Bible verse. Number two, it doesn't presuppose a God. You can think positively as an atheist or as an agnostic. It's a religiously neutral idea. But to your point, when you're living in a third world shithole country and you're struggling to feed yourself and your family, just thinking positively is not going to bring food to the table, and even praying is not going to do that. You're in a very horrible situation.
Yep. And just for fun, somebody in chat decided to say they've seen my games online and I'm not good. Well, if I've already acknowledged that I'm not good, then you're just being a dick. So I'll time you out and we'll move on. Let's see. Enoch in Pennsylvania, you're on with Dave and Matt. How are you?
Good. How are you guys?
Not bad. How can we help?
So basically my question, basically my question is just, I've heard you talk about well-being being like the cornerstone for morality, which I think makes sense. But like, what do you say to someone that says, I only care about myself, and so like I don't care about, hurting other people or whatever?
Sure, that's easy.
I don't care about well-being. And
does that person want internet access?
I don't know.
Do they want health care? Do they want food that they don't have to farm themselves? Do they want transportation? Do they want all of the things in society? See, the thing is, everything about my life impacts other people's lives, and everything about their life also impacts my life to varying degrees. Now, the reason to care about other people, even if you're just selfish, is to selfishly recognize that you are not in charge of everything that happens to you. Other people are in charge of some of that, and some of their actions are going to impact your life. And so it's in your best interest to care about other people's well-being, because that also encourages them to care about your well-being. And so if everybody just runs around saying, I don't give a crap about anybody but me, okay, that's the end. However, if people run around saying, I don't give a crap about anybody but me, however, I recognize that we have to share space. And so I'm not going to drive like I'm the only person on the road. I'm not going to spend like I'm the only person in this relationship. I'm not going to take actions with regard to healthcare that jeopardize other people. If someone genuinely despises everybody around them, they're disenfranchising themselves from society. They're not willing to contribute. So the truth of the matter is, I have yet to meet anybody who truly does not care about anyone but themselves. And I have yet to meet anybody who cares about themselves to such a degree that they would not take actions that are smart. And the smart action, even for the most selfish, is to make sure that we are contributing to the welfare of other people because their lives impact ours.
What about someone like a con artist who gets away with cheating people?
What about a con artist? A con artist knows they're doing something immoral.
Right.
And they're choosing to do it anyway.
How does that hurt them?
Maybe it doesn't. So what? It doesn't. There's no solution to that problem. You have Christian con artists too, you know. You have theistic con artists.
They say I don't care about other people.
I've never met the people who you claim exist who say they don't care about other people, but I've given you the answer that we should give them. To come back and say, what about con artists, means that you've ignored everything I've said and just said, yeah, but what about people who really, really don't care? The people who are con artists go to jail. When they get caught, they go to jail. What else can we do? There's no solution to this. Pointing to a God does not solve this problem in the slightest. There is no solution to any objection you could possibly make to secular morality that is solved in any way by appealing to a God. Go ahead, try.
I was just curious what your take was on that.
Yeah, my take is there are some shitty people. I start by working with the people who aren't so shitty, and then we force the shitty people to compliance or prison. It's an unfortunate, it sounds crass and cruel, but you know what it is? It's a pragmatic, useful way to live life, unlike being on your knees with your hands folded, begging for God to fix the problem for you.
Okay. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure. All right. Let's see if we got somebody else here who's asking for Dave here. Let's see. Danny in Los Angeles, you're on with Dave and Matt. How are you?
Oh yeah, Louisiana. They.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's entirely my fault. I just instinctively saw L.A. and not Louisiana.
No, that's fine.
Because given the choice between being in Louisiana or in Los Angeles, I'll take Los Angeles every day for the rest of my life.
Well, I might understand that. But yeah, I don't know if you're familiar what the prompt was for whatever question I had, but it was something like.
You think that God is the best explanation for the supernatural or the non-natural?
Right.
Except that demonstrate that first you need to demonstrate that anything supernatural actually exists. How can you do that?
Well, I think that by definition, something that's non-natural is not going to be verifiable.
Then you can't possibly have a good reason to believe that it's real. Why on earth would you believe something that you have no hope of verifying?
Well, you could have a priori arguments.
No. That's not verification. I asked why you would believe something that you cannot verify. And not only are you believing it, but you think you found an explanation for the thing that you can't verify. How does that work?
Well, I think there's a category error, right? Because if there's a non-natural object, right, we can
show me a non-natural object. I have no evidence that any non-natural object exists.
Well, your own mind is not natural.
No, my mind is not an extant thing. The mind is the label that we put on what the brain does.
Wait, why would
Everything about my mind is a product of my brain. It's not a non-natural thing that exists. It is absolutely the product of natural interaction.
Now, is it a product of your brain or is it your brain?
As far as we can tell, the thing we call mind is us labeling what the brain does. But you still have not provided any object that is non-natural that exists.
Well, I already pointed out that it was the mind, but rather than hearing...
I don't agree with you. So come up with something else, because I do not think that that is accessible. Not the least of which is that even if I were to agree with you that the mind was a non-natural thing, it doesn't exist as a thing unto itself. And you have no way of showing what the explanation for it is and why God would be a better explanation. First, you have to come up with and say, here's something that clearly exists and is real and is supernatural. How do you do that?
Yeah, I already said that, like, for instance, my intentional states...
You're not listening.
Right, so they can't be natural states.
You're not listening.
I'm listening now.
I've asked you several times how you could show that something is in fact non-natural, and all you keep doing is claiming that it is. How can you show that the mind is non-natural? Interrupt me again one more fucking time, I dare you. How can you show that the mind is not natural?
It's a category error. That's like asking, how can you show the number 9? I just don't
know.
No,
it's not a category error. That is you dodging the question. I asked, how can you show that the mind is in fact non-natural? And you claiming it's a category error means that you are just asserting that it is. And anything that you can assert without providing evidence, I can dismiss without providing evidence. So are you going to just waste our time, or are you going to show that something is in fact non-natural? Say category error again.
It's an unintelligible question.
It's not an intelligible question. The mind is either natural or non-natural. Show me which one it is and show your work. That's not an unintelligible question.
When we're talking about something metaphysical rather than physical, right, we're going to get arguments for metaphysical postulates as opposed to...
I'm not interested in metaphysical postulates. The mind, if it exists, is either natural or non-natural. You need to show which one it is.
Then I don't know what you mean by show other than argumentation.
Evidence, argumentation. So far, all you've done is just say it's a category error for me to say that it's natural.
Well, we just meant something different by show, because typically what people mean by show is like observation evidence. But that's...
You know what I'd like for you to show is the evidence that supports the notion that the mind is not natural.
Yes, minds have intentional states. Intentional states are normative, so they create the possibility of failure.
That is not a demonstration that something is not natural.
It was an argument. You just said
it's not an argument. You haven't. I'm asking you for fucking evidence that the mind is not natural. Because hang on, because your entire premise is there is something that is non-natural. That's premise 1. God is the best explanation for non-natural, is where you're going. But you haven't made the case that the thing you're pointing to is non-natural.
And to affirm that, I gave an argument for why the mind is non-natural, but you haven't...
No, you didn't.
...tackled anything.
No, you didn't. You just made an assertion and kept saying it was a category error.
So why don't you move from the mind to something else? Because I think we've exhausted the mind category. And then you know, my first thought when you asked the question was that, you know, Occam's razor. You know, when you have two competing claims for something that happened, usually the simplest.
That is not Occam's razor. That is not Occam's razor, and that's not what Occam's razor means. That notion.
Tell me what you think it means, Matt.
That notion, I tell you exactly what it means. It means do not multiply entities unnecessarily. It is often portrayed as the simplest explanation is more likely correct, but that is not what Occam's razor is or says. It just means that we don't get to multiply entities unnecessarily. And so when we have something like the mind, where you haven't shown that it's non-natural, it would be multiplying entities unnecessarily to propose a supernatural explanation for a mind when you haven't even demonstrated that the mind is something that is supernatural in origin.
What premise did you disagree with for my argument that the mind is normative?
You have not presented an argument with premises. How dare you suggest you have? What's your first fucking premise?
My first premise is that the mind is composed of intentional states. The second premise is that intentional states are normative states. And normative states, so this is the third premise, right? I'm just going to kind of do a little syllogism here. Normative states create the possibility of failure. The possibility of failure, right, is only made possible. Basically, it's not a failure or success, good or bad, is not seen in natural states. So that means that part of what the mind is, that's the same, the intentional aspect of the mind, can't be natural.
I don't follow your argument at all. The mind is the label that we put on what the brain does. If the brain stops working, there is no mind.
Well, I don't know. I don't think you could support that, right?
Well, all right. If
The idea-
show me a mind absent a brain.
So again, this is just it's an unintelligible question.
It's not an unintelligible question. I specifically said your view is that a mind can exist absent a brain, correct?
Yes, I don't think.
Then demonstrate that a mind can exist absent a brain, because I don't see evidence of that. That is not a nonsensical question, no matter how much fucking hand waving you want to do. Show me a mind that does not require a brain, and until you do, I will not accept that a mind can exist absent a brain, period.
I gave you those three premises. Which one do you disagree with? I can
goodbye, sir. You are a time waster. I just asked you to demonstrate a mind that can exist absent a brain. Can you do that or not?
You can just mute me. I gave you the
I can mute you. I can hang up on you. I'm giving you one more opportunity. Can you demonstrate that there is a mind absent a brain?
Let me give you an argument for why that's true, right?
No, can you demonstrate it? Can you fucking show that the thing you fucking claim fucking exists actually exists? How hard is this?
What? I don't know what you mean by show. If argument,
I know you don't.
Showing.
I know you don't. But your argument does not show that a mind exists absent a brain.
What's the first?
I tell you what the first thing is. The first thing is us moving on, because you are engaged in a time waster. You are so enamored with this notion that we don't understand consciousness and we don't have a full explanation for the mind that you want to just say, seems supernatural to me.
That's God.
Sorry. That's not the way it works. That is an argument from incredulity, essentially, that you just won't believe something. But I'm saying every example of a mind that we've ever seen correlates directly to a brain. I have yet to see evidence of a mind absent a brain. You think, well, the caller thought that there could be a mind absent a brain, but then just kept saying, I've made an argument. What don't you accept about my argument? First of all, I don't accept that your argument demonstrates that a mind can exist absent a brain. Not the slightest. But let's see. I thought that was a call actually for my guest, and it wasn't. So let's see if we can get a call that my guest would be keen on. Well, here's a weird question. Beth in Minnesota, I think it is. How are you? What's your question for Dave?
Yeah, I am. So I grew up in Detroit, and I went to a Catholic school for 12 years. I knew kind of back then that there were some priests and possibly some nuns that were homosexual. And the older I get, I'm kind of thinking that that's where they were shipped off, if you will, because growing up in the olden days, did gay exist? Oh, we'll just send our kids to the seminary and then they can live there, because if they have sex with other people and they're not procreating, it doesn't really count as sex. And I was wondering why back then they were protected. Well, let's just say this. There was a priest at my school, and he had an alcohol problem, or they guised it as an alcohol problem. And what I'm thinking is that he would drink, black out, abuse the kids, and then claim that he didn't do it because he was in an altered state, and blacked out and did it while he was drunk. And they, instead of doing anything about it, they just moved them to another parish. And it wasn't until, 20 years later that it kind of caught up to him, not from my school, but from another school. And nothing ever happened to him, except maybe he did community service and he was asked to no longer be a priest. And I feel like there's this long-standing, I don't know if I can use the word perversion or something, but I feel like they're protected, and I don't know what it is or why by the law.
Yeah, I can't speak to the law, and I wasn't a Catholic priest, but I'm aware of the systematic molestation of children by thousands of priests and the systematic cover-up by that church, how anyone could remain not only Catholic, but I'll just leave it at that, given that sad state of affairs, it is beyond me. So that's my first comment. The other piece to that is, and possibly part of the problem is why are priests not allowed to marry? The argument, as I understand it, traces it back to Jesus, who was allegedly never married, which is not in the New Testament. You can't find any evidence for that. But the other tint to that is that sex is somehow bad and something to be avoided. And it's just a very unnatural and unhealthy view of sexuality. I'm not saying that's the reason for the problem of the pedophile priests. The larger problem to me is the systematic cover-up that the Catholic Church engaged in by moving these priests that you're talking about. And I've heard some stories. I have had friends tell me stories over the years of abuse that they were aware of. And it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible.
Yeah, it's horrible, and it's sad, and it's disgusting. And, personally, I feel like I want to get a hold of his number and call him up, and without accusing him, just talk to him about, the effects that it can have on the, not only on the little boy's sexuality. It will affect his relationships if he doesn't deal with it and shoves it down into his emotions and never deals with it. Then his children will deal with it. It becomes an ancestral problem. And what I don't like is the statute of limitations that they have on it, because, but 10 years later, by the time the kid's 21, I'm thinking, he's not even a full adult at 21. He's still probably in shock by it. And it probably won't take until midlife crisis, maybe at that point, when he finally realizes, like, oh, fuck, I got to do something about this. And it may or may not even surface. So it's just,
So one of the things is that I think a lot of what Dave's pointing to and complaining about actually comes from Paul, because Paul was very, very down on marriage. Paul was down on women, and not in the good way. But this whole thing of, I want to make sure that we're very careful. It's not just the Catholic Church. It is Protestant churches as well, as we're finding out as more and more investigations are done. It's just the Catholics were far better at hiding and shuffling them around and not putting forward, not holding the criminals responsible for their action. And it's not just young boys, it's young girls. It has a massive impact on a bunch of people. It has nothing to do, by the way, with whether you're heterosexual or homosexual. It is a power thing. It is these individuals, when there's a Bible verse about God giving you over to a reprobate mind. And I would argue that what's happening with ministers who are abusing that position of power in order to sexually assault children is as close to a reprobate mind as you're likely to find within the church. And the fact that the churches, Catholic and Protestant, continue to make excuses for it and hide these people so that they don't have to face consequences for their crimes. I'm in agreement with Dave. I don't know how anybody can still be Catholic at all, but I also don't know how anybody could defend any church that's doing this sort of thing. Everybody was up in arms the other day because the Pope's social media liked some hottie in a short skirt, when the Pope isn't even really in charge of his social media. Somebody in the Vatican who normally tweets for the Pope forgot which account they were on and liked a gorgeous person, and everybody's like, oh, look what the Pope's liking. I wish the Pope had liked that. Matter of fact, I'd applaud him.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. On that note, we're not going to have a better answer for you, Beth. On that, I want to get to a couple other callers, but thanks so much for calling in. It's right to point out that these clergy should not be protected.
I love.
She said, I love, right as we were hanging up. I feel so bad. I don't know how to. All right. So we've got Greg in Florida who wants to find out why slavery is immoral, which is Perhaps one of the weirdest things I've ever heard. Greg, how are you?
Doing well. Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Do you think I should be allowed by law to own you as property?
If it's okay with you, Matt, I'd prefer not having a conversation as to what you and I personally believe, but rather more in terms of having a logical conversation about what.
I'm sorry that you think a conversation about what we believe is in any way not logical, but it will only be not logical on your end. I asked a question. Do you feel that it should be legally permissible for me to own you as a slave, as property?
That it seems like a really simple question to answer, but
it is a really simple question to answer. The answer is no. Well, if your answer is yes, then come on over. I got lots of shit in the garage that needs doing.
Matt, may I approach it from a different direction?
Are you going to answer my question?
Well, personally, I don't want to be anybody's slave.
Okay. See, instead of looking for traps, as I've had this conversation many more times than you have, maybe trust that I know what I'm asking. So if you don't want to be my slave and I don't want to be your slave, why isn't that enough?
So I would like to take it kind of away from humans for just a moment, because
I'm not, because slavery is all about fucking humans. Why would you want to take it away from humans? Right? Do you have some plan that precludes you from actually discussing the thing that you wanted to discuss?
Well, no.
Stick with humans.
This is actually, my question isn't about just only humans, though, and that's why I'd like your help.
But that's what slavery is. You called in to ask why slavery is immoral. Slavery only applies to other humans. If you're here to make a subtle animal rights point, just don't.
It's not for animal rights. It's more for why does it make sense? Like, is it okay if I ask you a question? It seems like you're not super.
I guess it's just frustrating to me that you will not answer mine. So when I don't answer yours, are you going to have any cause to be able to complain?
No. That's right.
Okay.
If you don't want to answer it, that's okay. It's just your.
So go ahead, ask your question.
The setup for what's troubling me, my question that I'm having, it's not a challenge for a way that you've presented something. It's in no way that you've presented something wrong. It's that I'm struggling with finding an answer for myself and hoping you can help.
I was hoping I could help too, but since you don't want to actually have a conversation, I don't know that I can.
Well, I'll present it. Maybe it'll make sense. Maybe it won't. If I think about owning a horse, and I don't want to make any assumptions that you think that's okay or not okay, but there are very few ways that I could actually acquire a horse if we're going to call a horse property, which is not going to be a hang-up point for me. But if I have a horse, I could capture one from the wild. I can barter or purchase or in some way acquire a horse from another person who has one if I have a reasonable belief or expectation that the horse is theirs in a legitimate fashion.
If you think for a second, Greg, that I need an education about how one might be go about getting property, you are much mistaken and you have massively misread the room. Get to the point.
What is the difference between owning a horse or owning a cow or owning a sheep or owning a person other than
finally,
because we are
finally, do we grant equal rights to those other animals? Can a horse vote?
So I apologize for not knowing how to.
Can a horse vote? Just answer the questions. This will all be easy. Can a horse vote?
Of course not.
Can a horse drive?
As far as we know, probably no to every.
Can a horse express itself and talk about what rights it wants and what rights it doesn't want?
Understood. I don't want to assume that I know where you're going, but no to all these questions.
Correct. So there's a difference between horses and humans, right?
Certainly.
Yeah. And we grant different rights to different species on a regular basis, right?
It would seem so.
And we've granted human beings the right to bodily autonomy and freedom such that they are not subject to being owned by someone, because we recognize that the world is a worse place when we allow people to be enslaved, that this has a net negative impact on the world, right?
Right. So that similarly had that.
Does the world have a net negative? Does the world suffer a net negative impact when I have a horse?
I don't think so.
Good. Now that should answer all of your questions, right? About why slavery is immoral, why we don't allow for enslaving humans, why it's different. By the way, I don't think we own or enslave animals. We are custodians of animals, and we can step in and take those animals away from people who are abusing and mistreating them. You don't have the right to just beat your animals. You don't have the right to be cruel, but it's not so much that this cat is my property as much as I am the custodian of this cat. It's not slavery. It's not the same. Slavery means you no longer have autonomy. You no longer have a right to say in what you do, that you are my property to treat as I want, because my television is my property and I can break it with a sledgehammer. I can't do that with people. I can't do that with animals. And we don't have animals as slaves, and we definitely don't keep humans as slaves. Kids are people. They're not slaves. You are the guardian of children. You don't own children as property. That's to answer somebody else in chat who tried to come up with something. Now, do you understand why slavery is immoral?
Thank you for clarifying that one.
Sure. I don't know if you had anything to add, Dave, but
no.
Yeah. There's another call about slavery that we may or may not get to, but I want to get some other people some options here as we come up with less on the last half hour of the show, because we're going to try and get stuff done. But we have Mac in California. Thanks for waiting. You're on with Dave and Matt.
Hey, David, Matt. Thanks for having me on.
Sure. How can we help?
Well, I just wanted to discuss, I thought a good topic perhaps for the two of you would be the necessity of religion and how that relates to God or the concept of God.
So what do you mean by the necessity of religion? Are we talking about strict philosophical, and actually we couldn't be. So I don't know what you mean by necessity of religion.
Well, I would say that it's almost that human beings just have a natural inclination towards, trying to understand their reality, and religion is the attempt to do that. So,
sure, but that's not, so you do realize that not everybody comes up with a God notion when they're trying to explain things, right? Some people actually don't have a God concept, like the Paraha, and other people, instead of going to the supernatural, look for naturalistic scientific explanations for how things are the way they are. So I don't see that religion is necessary. Can you clarify? Because I'd love to get Dave to chime in here, but when you say the necessity of religion, it seems like you're just saying, hey, people look at the world and they have questions, and many of them come up with these sort of religious notions to try to answer those questions. And I agree with that.
Yeah.
Is that all you're saying?
Do you?
No, I would say, religion
Are you
overarching than that, and that it actually encompasses, worldview more than just, a system of organized thought that people have devised. And I guess, let me put it broadly, I'd say that, most of, the foundation of what our society is built on has come through religion, and that, our very concepts of morality are grounded in that, whether you want to accept them as objective or subjective,
Except that they're not.
Similar.
My view of morality isn't grounded in Christianity or religion at all.
Well, I can understand you thinking that, but I would say that your whole psychology, is based on the culture that you were raised in. That culture.
No, sir. I've rejected the religion of the culture in which I was raised. I reject many of its precepts. The only thing I kept from the religion I was raised with were the things that were secularly justified, like you shouldn't murder people. But if you listed like the 10 Commandments, I don't have any God, let alone one before Yahweh. I have no objection to making graven images. I have no objection to not honoring a mother or father. I have no objection to taking the Lord's name in vain. I'm against lying, but not all lying, because I think that there are occasions where lying is justified. I'm against murder, but I'm not against coveting. That's capitalism. That's what built the United States, coveting what the Joneses have. So I'm okay with homosexuality and LGBTQIA issues and marriage equality and all sorts of things that I was against when I was a Christian that many other Christians are against. So how could you say that when I've done the work, and this is me being a little outraged right now, Mac, so bear with me, because what I see from believers in religion is they, without thought and without evidence, accept a prepackaged, here's the rules by which you must follow. And other people like myself have spent years studying and developing secular ethics, which are superior. And yet you just want to say, well, you're just a product of your culture. My morality is in many ways the exact opposite of the culture you're pointing to. So why would it get credit? God's not okay with gay people.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Can I say something, Matt?
Say as much as you want.
Yes. Yeah, so I think there is a larger misconception that morality is somehow the sole provenance of religion, and that's just patently false. And having been a minister for 10 years, I mean, I can tell you, I've met some of the meanest people in my life in a church. They were mean to their core. They treated others horribly. They may have had a certain set of beliefs. They may have believed in the 10 Commandments and not killed someone, but at their core, they were miserable people. And we know some of the horrible things that have been done in the name of God throughout the ages. So the notion that somehow morality can exist apart from religion is false, and I reject that. And Matt, I agree with
so Mac, help us out here.
Okay.
Because I don't want to misrepresent you, and I don't want to just walk all over you. But when you say the necessity of religion, I'm still confused. But I will let you move on or clarify as you see fit. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would clarify that by saying, first of all, I'm not here to promote any particular religion. It's, especially Old Testament morality. I think, that's a dead horse at this point. But I would say that it's kind of, I enjoyed your discussion with Jordan Peterson, and I would actually take his viewpoint that, foundational to our Western society are these conceptions of morality that's not just based on Christianity per se, but,
like what?
Down through all of history.
Like what?
For me, I'm okay. Well, I would say, the concept of love, the concept of compassion, the concept of
hang on. Love and compassion aren't matters of law at all, and are not necessarily principles of any moral system. And love and compassion aren't in any way the attributes of a single religion. They are part and parcel of who we are as human beings.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. In fact, I accept a lot of. I'm very eclectic in my take on religion. I like Buddhist principles. Taoism, I think, is a good philosophy in many ways. Christ, I think, was a very noble figure that brought us a lot of truth, into the world. And I think,
like what?
Underestimate.
Like what? Now, let's assume for a second that Jesus existed, and we have an accurate reporting of what he said or did. What important thing did Jesus enlighten us about?
Well, I wouldn't try to argue that the concept of forgiveness didn't exist before Christ, but he's the one that brought that into the forefront as,
that is utter nonsense.
Towards
the notion of forgiveness is not only not specifically Christian, but doesn't originate there. So, I mean, you can't say, oh, what did Jesus enlighten us about? Did he enlighten us about figs when he was cursing the fig tree? I want to know what Jesus brought to the world
per se
that is good and substantive and true.
Well, that, I would argue that he changed the world in a sense. We went from, much more barbaric, warlike cultures to societies, that turn towards the concept that he promoted whether you like the institutions that it arose from or not, and let's not get, we can get into historical discussions.
But that matters. So once again, I'm trying to figure out what you think that Jesus brought into the world. And it seems like you think Jesus showed up and made everything better, except that that's not what the evidence points to in the slightest.
No. Okay. Let me put it this way. I'd say that Jesus brought the same thing into the world that Krishna did, that the Buddha did, that Gandhi did, that Martin Luther King did, that all the great men that have changed the world in a positive way had this, some notion, a concept of God that guided them. Now, that's what I would call, religious necessity.
So
I think that it's
so. Let me. Can I ask? Yeah. Can I ask the caller a question, Matt?
Jump on it.
So speaking of the concept of God, let's talk about that. So, do you mean the God who said he delighted in bashing the heads of babies against rocks in Psalms? Or what about the God who drowned innocent people, including children, in the mythology of the flood? I mean, where is morality in that? Where is an example of goodness in that? Because that doesn't look like goodness to me. The God that I just mentioned, and I could tell other stories, is a pretty immoral character, if not amoral at times. If you take that character as being someone, as being a real being, and I don't think you want to do that.
Yeah, as I said, I'm not here to try to support Old Testament morality or even the historicity of all things, in the Old Testament. I'm not here to promote Christianity. I'm here to talk about the necessity of religion as the Latin root for that is to rebind or reconnect. And to me, my concept of God, might lay more in terms of a God of Spinoza, a God of Einstein, that, is part of the entire cosmos. And I know it gets kind of nebulous and not very explanatory when you start talking about God in that way. But, I wouldn't define God in any terms of any specific religion. I would say the concepts that have promoted, cultures and our very essence of our morality that we accept. That, secular humanism, I applaud you for a lot of the good that you want to do in the world. And, I think secular humanism has the potential to do a lot of good. But I think without that grounding that it got from religions,
No, sir. Stop suggesting that secular humanism got its grounding from religion. Secular humanism got its grounding by standing in opposition to religion after religion after religion. It is the opposite of that. It is the recognition that, as far as we can tell, we are stuck here with the need to fix and handle our problems ourselves. And so we need to come up with solutions, and we don't get to appeal to the supernatural. That means we don't get to appeal to the supernatural for assistance, and we don't get to appeal to it when we want to be bigots. I see no necessity of religion. I'd love for you to say one thing about religion that you think is specific to religion and necessary, because I haven't heard anything.
I would say the nature of the concept of love your neighbor as yourself, love.
Are you suggesting that I can't love someone if I'm not religious?
No, we can argue from evolution and say,
I don't need to argue from evolution. So you're not saying that religion is required for love. So we're back to what is religion? What is the one thing of religion that you're saying is necessary and true and good? Because you keep going back to love, which isn't tied to religion necessarily.
Well, no, I would say that it is. I mean, I think most people would.
I just literally asked you if you thought love was necessarily tied to religion.
No, well, I was saying you can argue that the concept of love and our desire for well-being of others, we can try to argue, through.
Do I need religion in order to love?
No, you don't need a specific religion.
Okay, then religion isn't relevant to love, right?
No.
Do I need a bowling ball if I want to go bowling?
That's a false dichotomy. I would say the concept of love.
Don't say it's a false dichotomy. I asked, do I need a bowling ball if I want to go bowling?
I mean, okay, no. Yes, you need a bowling ball.
Yes, because the way we define bowling, the act of doing that, a bowling ball is a necessary component of that. Do I need religion to love someone? You've said no, which means religion is not a required component of what it means to love.
Okay, well, let me put it this way, because maybe this will give you an idea of more of the overarching idea of what I'm talking about. I would agree with Jordan Peterson in that the basis, the foundational reality that our, Western society, at least, is built on is, religion is foundational to that. And that if we sweep all of that away, that I really do think we would have anarchy. I don't think so.
I am not remotely interested in your bullshit speculations any more than I was with Jordan's bullshit speculations while I sat there and he was making them. To suggest that the world would crumble without religion is just fear-mongering bullshit that has no basis in fact.
I'm not saying without religion, but the concepts and
you are literally saying religion is necessary, and you are desperately trying to find the one thing you can point to show that it's necessary. And when you come up with examples and I show how they're not necessary, they don't make religion necessary, you just keep moving on to the next thing. And now you've moved on to Jordan. I'm going to agree with the Jordan Peterson here about what the foundations of our culture are. Well, this call wasn't about the foundations of culture. Our culture, irrespective of its foundations, is doing just fine. And none of that gets to the necessity of religion. So what is it that makes religion necessary?
Okay, let's think of it in terms of causality. I would say that the cause of the principles that our culture is built on have sprung from religion. And in that sense, now that we have these concepts of morality and
like what?
Or at least respecting your neighbor.
My morality is not tied to religion. My position on issues is not tied to any religion at all. If all you're saying is that we have positions because that we also had religions, so fucking what? That's not a necessary religion. That's just describing that people have done a lot of thinking about stuff and moved on. What am I missing, Dave?
Let me attack it from another.
No, let's go back. I mean, I don't want to bring up slavery, but I mean, if we're talking about what a great bedrock of morality and righteousness that religion has brought to us, then what do you do with slavery? Or Matt, to go back to something you said earlier, what do you do with the genocide of people that we kicked out of this land, who were here before we? I mean, you're trying to make an argument about this foundation that never existed. And then if you want to make that argument, I just gave you a glaring example of slavery is one that, stands in opposition to everything you're saying. How do you explain that? And just so you know, people used religion to make arguments to support slavery, as did those who attacked it. I'm not getting it.
I just want to know what makes religion necessary, because I have yet in all of my years to have anyone come up with an example. The things they like to point to tend to be things about who we are as human beings, that we are communal, that we have family, that we have people we care about, we have people we love, we get together in groups, we benefit from working in groups. And that means that we have to create some rules about how that group's going to interact. And that means that we need to sit down and either say, oh, you can do this or you cannot do that because my invisible friend says so, or we can argue about what we should be allowed to do from a reasonable foundation. I choose the latter because it's better, but at no point has anything in my life required religion.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And perhaps framing it as a necessity of religion was maybe a little bit too strong of a claim. But can we just transition quickly to
Sure.
I wouldn't go so far as to be an atheist?
Well, you do realize that all an atheist is someone who's not convinced there's a God, right? So it's not like you have to go very far. You've actually gone in the wrong direction. You believe something that you may or may not have good reason for. But all I'm saying is I'm not convinced. But go ahead. What was the next point?
No. Well, I think I really enjoy all the atheist theists back and forth. I think it's pretty fascinating. And honestly, I think because of the fact that you can't prove a not X and therefore say X. And
you can though. If a proposition is falsifiable, that's essentially what that means, is that there is some way to show that it's false. So the statement "you can't prove a negative" just isn't true. You can prove many negatives.
No, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that's an argument from incredulity if you do it either way. If I say that you can't prove that God does not exist,
you don't have to. That's not the requirement. The requirement is to prove that God exists. Whether or not we can prove that God doesn't exist is irrelevant.
You can say that I can't prove that God exists, therefore he doesn't. But both of those are arguments.
I'm not going to say that. I would just ask you: can you prove that God exists?
Okay, I know you don't like. I know you may not like this tack, but I'm going to go with a cumulative argument. And please don't associate this with any Christian apologists necessarily or anything like that. But I think it does make sense logically, just if you take, all the information that we have from science and everything else, including evolution, I would say that there's a good cumulative case argument that, based on causality, based on the complexity of life, based on consciousness, that there is some causal principle that goes beyond brute facts, at an infinite regress that can explain all of reality.
You just lost. You just lost. You watered down your God to the point where it is now nothing. Because when you say that something overcomes brute facts, now you are making appeals to something other than facts. And the only thing I care about are facts. So you've watered your God down to the point where it is now useless. And all you're really saying is that when I look around at the world, it makes more sense to me that a God is responsible for it than that there's some other explanation. And that makes your argument fallacious. And so if you're not going to present any reason to believe in a God, and you're just going to go with fallacies, and then you're just going to make assertions about the necessity of religion, I think we got to move on because there's only like 8 minutes left in the show.
Okay, well, let me I'll just end this and say that nothing that I said was fallacious.
No, sir. I just pointed out the fallacy that as soon as you claim that it goes beyond facts, you are no longer talking about something that is tied to reality.
I never said anything goes beyond facts. I was saying causality.
Literally, there's people in chat quoting you about your brute fact statement. Are you saying that you didn't say that?
I'm saying that if you're trying to take ultimate reality back to
what is ultimate reality? I only know reality.
The entire cosmos,
that's reality, not ultimate reality. That's reality.
Okay, just reality. I'm saying that if you want to take reality back to some unknown brute fact, self-causing physical laws that existed from eternity, that's just as much of a mystery as any concept of God. And
no. Saying we don't know is preferable to pretending that you do. And that's what you're doing. You are pretending you know when the right answer is we don't know.
Shit.
Ultimately, I don't think, but I'm saying that the cumulative evidence leans towards
that is not an argument.
Force.
I don't care if you use the word cumulative. Do you know how obnoxious it is to have somebody say, well, the cumulative assessment is that you haven't provided anything? I might as well just say the cumulative evidence is against you. Oh, the cumulative assessment of people who I've talked to this week are against you. You have not made an argument. You have not provided evidence. You have just prevented another way to shirk up. I'm gonna go ahead and drop the call because I want to try and get to at least one more call. Specifically for Dave before we run out of time. I appreciate the patience, Dave. And by the way, Dave has been diligently refreshing his camera whenever it goes slightly astray. But Julian in Florida, you're on, and I'll let you sort this out with Dave. How are you?
Hey,
Julian?
Matt, big fan of yours. Thanks for having me. Hey, do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you. Continue.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Perfect. Yeah, so my question was on compatibilism and determinism. I'm less familiar with compatibilism, but my question was if either of those are true, and what doesn't that mean, like whether you end up as a theist or an atheist, whatever position you end up in is determined, and so if that's true, how do you establish any truth? Like, how do you know it's actually true if you were determined to believe that it was true?
Yeah, I'm not so sure I understand.
I'll jump in on this one just because I've done it.
Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
So the fact that I was determined to believe something also, if you're going with a pure determinism thing, also means that I'm determined to act in a certain way. And so I will act in a way that has me denouncing flawed reasoning, and that potentially changes mine. Because the fact that we're determined to believe something does not mean that you are determined to keep believing it. We can, in fact, change our mind. We can become convinced of something, and then we change. And so that's the reason why we're doing the argument. So if you believe in libertarian free will, then your question is moot, because I'm doing it because it's my free will. If you don't believe in libertarian free will, I'm doing it because I was determined to, and your entire discussion doesn't matter, because whether I was determined to believe something or determined to change somebody's mind, it's all just matter in motion. I could no more stop doing what I'm doing because you have written off the notion of volition of any kind. So compatibilists define free will in such a way that it is not incompatible with determinism. That's it.
Okay. I was more not more of what you were doing, and maybe I just misunderstood. But I was getting to I guess whether or not you convince anyone or not of any position,
we do
in and of itself determined.
Yes.
Isn't that determined?
Yes.
And so then, if I believe something, right? So like, let's say I were to change my mind and go from theist to atheist. Is that because it's in fact true, or just because I just have?
Because that's what you've become convinced of
an argument.
The assessment of truth is, for me, truth is defined as that which comports with reality. And so all we can do is take a statement and investigate how consistent it is with our understanding of reality. That's it.
Okay. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I wish there was more to it. And it gets really frustrating. And for the people, thanks, Julian, by the way, for the people who are like, my ex-wife, for example, was like, she believes she has free will and nothing's going to change her mind. And, I get it. But I wonder, Dave, as we try to move towards wrapping today up, what was the one thing that you struggled with the most that led to you getting out?
I would say it was two things. One was the deconstruction of Christianity, particularly the resurrection of Jesus. When studied from an academic perspective, it just didn't hold up for me anymore. That seed was planted in grad school, but I could never let go of that. It was a very compelling argument. It has everything to do with the dating of the New Testament, as simple as that. Paul is prior. Paul writes prior to the Gospels. Paul does not mention the empty tomb. It's as simple as that. The empty tomb doesn't show up until 25 years later in Mark. So a lot of literary mischief can occur in 25 years. So that was one. It was the academic study. The second one was theodicy. Just the simple notion of how do you reconcile suffering and evil with the notion of a good and an omnipotent God? And I don't think you can. And it was those two things that came together that finally led me to say, I can't do this anymore. I can't be a minister and stand up in front of a few hundred people and talk about God anymore.
So were you part of the Clergy Project at all, or did you?
Yeah, no. So Matt, the Clergy Project didn't exist. I thought I was the only minister in the world who had lost his faith. I thought I was all alone. John Updike, though, in 1996, the year that I left ministry, wrote a book called In the Beauty of the Lilies. And it was about a Presbyterian minister who loses his faith and walks away from ministry and enters the world of sales, which is exactly what I did. So that was my, reading that book was redemptive for me. But no, the Clergy Project didn't exist. If it had, I wouldn't have felt
it's a great resource, by the way, for anybody who's not familiar with the Clergy Project. I have a number of friends who are in the Clergy Project. I've met people through there. I've been fortunate enough to counsel some people who were in the Clergy Project at that time. I'm so happy that something like that happened for me. So theodicy, the problem of evil, is never something it's never really resonated with me as an actual issue. And I think it's because of the particular notion of Southern Baptist theology that I was indoctrinated with. already includes essentially a defeater, that it's human beings who brought sin and death into the world through their sin, and that, you know, that's where the Bible's going to put the responsibility. But I certainly understand when you're dealing with family and friends and someone who's lost a child, and they're coming to you and saying, you know, how can this sort of thing happen? You know, how could God give me a child that I waited for and wanted and loved, and then take that child away? That just seems unbearably cruel. And the most you can ever get out of it from pastors is this notion of, well, it happened for a reason. Maybe God is giving you some purpose, or God is trying to strengthen you, or whatever else. And as a Christian, I immediately shrugged off the, you know, God needed an angel, or God just wanted them to come home. That's a bunch of bull. I mean, that was bullshit when I was a Christian, that was any sort of reasonable explanation. But the notion that God has some plan for your life that required you to lose a child, God needs a better fucking plan. I don't know, you know, okay, you can learn through trial and hardship. You absolutely can, but that doesn't mean that you need, you know, a child to suffer through cancer and die before the age of 6. I mean, that's just bizarre to me.
Yeah. Yeah, Matt, the death of any child, let alone, I mean, you know, the how many 100,000 die of starvation every year, but the death of one child alone is enough to absolutely bury the notion that God has a plan for your life. That is a largely Western, white, upper middle class notion that often gets existentially reinforced, but it doesn't play in a cancer ward, doesn't play in the NICU. And if it doesn't play in the NICU, it isn't the gospel.
And actually, you know, it's one of those things where you're right that it is newer and whiter and Protestant, et cetera. When you go back to like Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, the responses back then to why do bad things happen to good people was shut your mouth and know your role. You know, it's like back then the Rock was God.
Yeah, Jonathan Edwards. Yeah,
but it's go ahead.
And Matt, to be fair, I never offered those pious platitudes when I was a minister. Just to be clear, I had moved beyond that myself. Now, did I talk about God? Absolutely. Did I talk about God glibly? Absolutely. But I would never have said that to anyone. I never did as a minister. My position was, this doesn't make sense. And you know what? You have a right to be angry at God, and there's nothing wrong with that kind of anger. That was my position.
And you know, I was never actually in the ministry. I was working to be in the ministry, managed to find my way out before I sank a decade into it. Which some people like you might say, oh, well, that makes Matt smarter. That does not make Matt smarter at all. Because I still went a great many years believing something without good reason, because there were people around me who shared that belief. I understand that. What I don't understand quite often is the people who hang on to those beliefs far longer than they should when they're faced with objections and arguments and problems with that. I want to especially thank Dave. I'd love to get you back on the show at some point. You know, take more calls sometime. You can find at dbramsey.com. You can find Dave's book there. And it's up on the screen now. Speaking of God, we don't know shit. And I'll forgive him for censoring shit, because I know that he's trying to appeal to an audience that goes beyond my linguistic skill with profanity and cursing. But that information there is so that you guys can go out and take a look at Dave's book. We'll do what we can to get Dave back on the show. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Thanks everybody who made the super chats and donations, who joined, subscribed, smash the like button. Like, I'm looking at it right now. I can see it's 750. If it doesn't go to 755, then there are 4 of you who just aren't paying attention to me. I'm talking to you. But on that note, please stay safe, stay healthy. If you're traveling, if you're visiting with family over these holidays, please take every reasonable precaution that you can. Follow the guidelines. I will not be here next week. You'll be pleased to know that Jenna and Anthony Magnabosco are going to be here to talk to you guys. Once again, give a huge shout out to the crew. And that includes not just the people whose faces Please have a safe holiday season. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
What will it take for you to start?